What was Israel commanded to do in order for the walls of Jericho to fall? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Joshua on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing Joshua 6 verses 1 to 14. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Joshua 6 verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Joshua 6, beginning at verse 1. Now Jericho was securely shut up because the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all of you and all you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days, and 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass, when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him." Then Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord." And he said to the people, "Proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord." So it was, when Joshua had spoken to the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord advanced and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Now Joshua had commanded the people, saying, "You shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say to you, 'Shout,' then you shall shout." So he had the ark of the Lord circle the city, going around it once. Then they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. Then 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went continually and blew the trumpets, and the armed men went before them. But the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. And the 2nd day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. In our last lesson, we had Israel in Gilgal preparing to attack Jericho. Joshua had gone off by himself towards Jericho, and behold, a man with a sword appeared before him. This man identified himself as the captain of the Lord's army, which would be on Israel's side. We discussed that this person was God, due to him accepting worship, as well as the command for Joshua to remove his sandals, for he was standing on holy ground. This would only be true if Joshua was standing in the presence of the Lord. Coming now to chapter 6, we have finally come to Israel being commanded to attack. Overall, it has been 129 chapters of the Old Testament, about 3 3/4 books of the Old Testament, and 463 Old Testament lessons in this podcast since Israel exited Egypt. But they're finally here. The state of the city of Jericho is one of fear. We not only know that from the previous chapter, but we know that by their actions here. The city was securely shut up so that nobody came out and nobody came in. Now, for any city, this would be a problem because eventually the people would run out of food, water, and other necessities, meaning the gates would have to someday be opened or the people would die. But God was not going to have Israel wait out the city. He was going to get Israel to attack it, but not in the usual way, for the walls posed an obstacle. You can't climb them, for they would be too tall, and you would open yourselves up to being attacked even if you could climb them. And the walls would be too strong for Israel to use tools to break through, for there were no explosives in use by those peoples at that time. So unless the doors were open, God would have to perform his second miracle recorded for us here in Joshua, for he would have to knock the walls down. In order to continue to build Israel's faith in him, though, he didn't immediately knock them down. Instead, God told Joshua to have the men of war march around the city. In the first 6 days, the men would march around the city once, while 7 priests would bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of God. The actual order of the march is given to us in verse 9. The armed men would march ahead. The 7 priests with the 7 horns would be next, blowing their trumpets as they went. After the priests would come the ark of God, which would be followed by the rear guard. During these 6 days, Joshua gave the people instructions not to shout or even speak during the march, for God had not given them victory yet. The 7th day would be different. The order of the march would be the same, but instead of marching around the city once, they would march around 7 times. After they did this, the priests would make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when the people would hear the sound of the trumpet, they would shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city would fall down flat. On its face, this sounds like an absurd command, for not only can a lot of people shouting not collapse the city wall, but this marching around the city opened the people up to attack if soldiers positioned themselves at the top of the wall. And that's the point. This wasn't a sound military tactic. This was an act of faith on the part of Israel that God would protect them. If the wall of Jericho fell, it would not be by Israel's might and strength, it would be by God's. God had miraculously caused the Red Sea to part and the Jordan River to stop. Do you think a wall was going to be too much for God? Israel had faith and marched around the city for the first 6 days as God commanded, and God protected them. We'll discuss the 7th day march, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Joshua 6, verses 15 to 21, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.